Good morning. It is Friday, March 13th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, 4 days to elections in Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party is weakening in the polls. Does Israel's left wing have a shot at heading the next government 14 years after winning its last election campaign? We will take a closer look at some of this campaign's most memorable and entertaining political clips. And later on the show, we return to our series on women in Israeli politics, focusing this time on social justice and women's rights champion Zehava Galon, who is left of the political dial. Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and we begin in Israel today, where the clock is ticking on Israeli elections, and with 4 days to go, where the Likud party is bleeding mandates, so to speak. Over the past few days, surveys have shown a considerable weakening of the incumbent Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the latest survey grants his Likud party only 21 mandates in comparison with the Zionist Union's 24 mandates. So could March 17 mark the end of the Bibi reign? With me in studio to try and answer this question, our I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Tal, good morning to you. Professor Avi Dgani, head of the Geocartography Polling Agency, who conducted this last survey. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And also the director of the Digital and Advertising Department and Ben Chorin and Alexandrovich Agency. I did that right. I said it right. Noam Fuhr and Noam, thank you for being with us. But Professor Dgani, let's start with you. This is Friday the 13th, ironically so. This is the last time a survey can come out in Israel by law to our viewers, to the audience, and you conducted this last survey for us at I-24 News. Let's take a look at the numbers. This is the last survey, and the numbers are as such: 21 for Likud, 20 for the Zionist camp, 11 Jewish home. I want to focus first, though, on those big two blocks to begin with. Professor Dgani, everybody this morning in Israel, when one looks at the newspapers, are talking about a possible upset. We were discussing what kind of word we can use on the results that may or may not be the outcome of the elections. Everybody's talking about an upset, and your poll shows that possibly there might be one.
Yeah, and I join many of my colleagues that show quite the same.
Okay.
And it all happened really in the last, so to speak, week, because we also maybe are quite the same, 24, 24, 23, 22, and so on. And sort of in the last week, we had this change, this dramatic change that turned over the wheel. And I think that what came together are two elements, which are the two leading elements. One, economic. We have about 35 people, for 35% of our households who are very weak economically and all the way to poverty. And this is a serious matter. And the other one is personal. Very much, I think, the personal even more than the economic, although the economic is very drastic and important, right, but everyone talks about it. Then personality, you cannot just talk about it. And I think that that gap that was in between Netanyahu and Bougie Herzog, actually, is closing a little bit. And many people, even within the circles of the Likud, do not like personally the way Netanyahu behaves internally, even in the Likud, people who leave him around, people from the Likud, and this makes the difference.
Yes, and I want to look at the numbers yet again. Let's pull those numbers up again and just take a look at the trends that we're showing. We're talking once again, this is the last survey coming out on this Friday, March 13th, 2015. If we can look at those numbers once again. This is the latest election poll. I believe that this is coming out, the 4-seat gap. That's not the poll that we saw a second ago, is it? Okay. The upset that you were talking about also when it comes to the personality, I want to take a look at what you meant with the personality. You're talking about Bibi from within, Benjamin Netanyahu from within, also from the people that you're polling, the people that, you know, your office is specifically polling. Are you hearing dissent when it comes to dislike to Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, we know that what was the matter for a long time is that 60% and more wanted to see Netanyahu replaced, which doesn't change, even increases. Then Bougie, however, was not in the minds of people as the one to replace him, only 35% or so. But now it changes because it went up for Bougie. I think they did a great deal and did well in the campaign as to show the person that the person is good and no one hates him. That's very important. We look for a person who is a person, a mensch, who is a man you can trust, who is a good person, good heart,
To our
what the premises
non-Yiddish-speaking audience,
means
I
to
think
do.
mensch, though, is well known around the world. Mensch being, you know,
And he comes from a good family and good tradition, and really,
Yes.
rabbi and the president, his father and grandfather.
He's got that. But speaking of which, and let's turn to, you know, what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say yesterday about the man that you described as who people think of as a mensch. Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday opted to give an interview to most of the bulk of the Israeli mainstream channels and had the following thing to say, because everybody is basically discussing will there not be a unity government in the event that the elections come out with a split decision, so to speak, in the middle, or too hard to call. This is what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to say yesterday in an interview at primetime Israeli Channel 2 last evening. Let's have a look.
A rotation government is not an option, since they are clearly divided between two worldviews, and I do not even aspire for one. I will not head a rotation government, and we must prevent one. I do not regret calling for early elections, because the government was already unable to function. I do believe that if the national right-wing bloc voters, who favor me as the Prime Minister, will go out and not vote to other right-wing parties, but close the gaps between the Zionist Union and the Likud, then we will win.
Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, listening to Prime Minister Netanyahu say, first of all, there's an interesting thing that he gave an interview to Channel 2, Channel 1, but not to Channel 10, correct?
Well, yeah. One of Netanyahu's close associates told me a few days ago that when Netanyahu is in panic, he bleeds. And that leaves a lot of room for mistake. Netanyahu did decide to go on a media blitz, a rare media blitz. Netanyahu does not usually give interviews to Israeli media. He went on an interview blitz, but he had his demands, and he would not give an interview to Aviv Drucker, who is a Channel 10 journalist, one of maybe Netanyahu's biggest critics amongst Israeli journalists, and that, of course, created an uproar and maybe even a backlash but I think mainly amongst journalists who thought it was an outrageous decision. I do not think this is something that actually influences the voters, but Netanyahu is trying to stop the negative momentum. This is part of his big effort to start the negative momentum. And I think the tragedy of all of this, in many ways, from Netanyahu's point of view, is that he voluntarily gave up 2 years of reign and went to early elections. And in many ways,
this may be backfiring.
In many ways, this could be backfiring. But again, we have to remember that the numbers, the math, the arithmetics are not on Herzog's side. He is on the lead, but at the moment it seems much more difficult for him to create or form a government. Regarding Netanyahu's statements about rotation, unity government or rotation, election promises have been meant to be broken. Netanyahu's strategy now is to show that he's in a battle it's a battle between right and left. It's a battle about the future of the country, and the strategy of the Likud now, in many ways, is to create fear and concern among the right-wing voters that they need to come to vote for Netanyahu, because every vote here matters at the end of the day.
The irony about this is that this was the leading line of the campaign for the Zionist camp when it comes to, every vote matters. Even if you don't agree completely with the center-left, you have to put the vote in there.
For both sides, for both the Zionist Union and the Likud, the higher voter turnout for both of them can make or break the opportunity to form the government. But while the Zionist Union, we're seeing a much more enthusiasm amongst the left side of the political spectrum, there's a lack of motivation among Likud voters. There is a feeling in the Likud campaign of Netanyahu doing a very bad job, and we're hearing more and more Likud senior politicians speaking out against Netanyahu, not by name yet, but it does signal that the Likud is preparing for the day after Netanyahu already.
Right. And that's that's a fascinating notice to take a look at, because it's something slightly reminiscent of 1999, slightly reminiscent of where the Likud, back in the day when he lost to Ehud Barak. That said, the campaign not completely over, and there's also a campaign clip that the Likud came out with yesterday. I'm about to hit you with this one. But this campaign clip is something that first let's take a look at, and I think it goes to show maybe what Tal Shalev was saying, that when the Likud is bleeding or when Bibi's bleeding, then they're firing in every direction. Let's have a look at the latest clip that came out yesterday, I think, in the last several days.
Here are the results of the exit polls. The Zionist Union is leading by 3 mandates. The Joint Arab List is these elections' biggest surprise, with 15 seats. Placing it third, the Israeli president cast the task of assembling the new government to Tzipi and Bougie, who will turn to the Joint Arab List, Yesh Atid, Meretz, and Kulanu. The picture is clear. If the votes for the right are spread, and the Likud, headed by Netanyahu, will not receive a clear mandate to put together the government, the entire right will be in the opposition. The road for an extreme left-wing government is paved. It's us or the left, only the Likud, only Netanyahu.
Noam, you know, of the ad agency and persuasion and intelligence, when you look at something like that, I mean, to me it spells it again, us or them, but pointing a clear finger that, what, if you get Bougie, if you get Herzog in the lead, you're also getting, what, the Arabs?
First, the internet spots, the internet election spots showed Herzog, Livni, and Ahmad Tibi. Deferred to the spots in the television.
Right.
Just saw Machal, the Likud's note on the ballot. Another interesting thing, by the way, in this spot, that there is a miscalculation in the coalition that they've built. If we can see that on the screen, they have made a calculation of the Zionist Union and Meretz, etc., leads to 43 mandates, in which it is actually 63, I'm sorry. But we can see that the Likud now is really not just on real damage, it's showing that the house is in real danger. The people of the Likud should now understand that the government, the Benjamin Netanyahu's regime, is really, really on dangerous place. He can lose his regime on Tuesday, and that's what the Likud is trying to say, to convey the message to their people, to their voters. The house is on fire. You should vote for the Likud. You shouldn't vote for the Jewish Home or other parties. You should vote for the Likud in order to regime to continue.
If we continue with the Yiddish, it's been termed as the Gewalt campaign.
But you know, we don't know yet what's going to happen, but we should worry about the following things.
Yes.
The next election.
Because, the ones a year and a half from now? Okay.
Because it may occur, I think, in 2 years now from now. And we were speaking since we started the broadcast that it looks to be a deadlock, that nothing but unity is going to be, but unity is not here. So let's look about what happened with changing the law in the Arab list. Now they are 13, they used to be 11, they hated one another, yet together they gained.
Right.
So maybe we should change to 5% minimum, so that Jews learn to work together, not two people make 3 departments.
I think that's about, no, I think
Just
one of
you know, America has only 2.
One of the problems with these elections is, first of all, they were useless. They were termed as useless to begin with, unnecessary to begin with. Then they started to get very interesting. It was a very interesting campaign, a lot of events, very juicy campaign. But at the end of the day, the Israeli public, and you do hear it when you speak to people on the streets, they are fed up with going to the ballots every 2 years, and there has to be a change in the system to stop this. Because there are like 3 possible scenarios or outcomes of the next government: a right-wing government, a narrow right-wing government, a narrow left-wing government, or a unity government. Any one of them doesn't seem that it has the chance to last very long. So the Israeli public is definitely fed up with that, and there has to be a change. And some of the candidates have been promising electoral change, but we've also heard these promises again and again, and nothing has happened with them.
But we have to remember the bandwagon effect. People can look at the surveys on the newspapers today and might vote for the Zionist Union in order, again, to replace Bibi's regime.
But on the other hand, they could also see that Netanyahu is losing, and people could see that Netanyahu is losing. This could immobilize some of the Likud voters, and at the end of the day, we could have a different surprise. There are, Professor Dgani probably knows, there are a lot of seats sitting on the fence.
There are seats sitting on the fence. Was actually with a very fascinating poll that will be revealed Sunday on this channel. That will be revealed on Sunday on I-24 News. But I want to talk about the margin of error of polls. Professor Dgani, when you look at, at the numbers that you came out with, this last poll, which, you and your colleagues actually seem to be right in the same, on the same page. Yeah. 21 to, it's 24 Zionist camp, right? 21 to the Likud. Margin of error in polls like that is what?
Margin of error is about 4% plus minus when you do 500, which we normally do. But now in election time, we sometimes do 1,000, which is a lot, but then it turns to be only 3.2, so it is a margin of error. But more than a margin of error, we have a temperament. Things change. You see in the last week what happened.
Yeah.
It goes by feeling, it goes by temperament, it goes by how much you hate someone or you like someone for what he did. And then you have differences. You have differences within parties. You have religious parties. He's a religion and more religious and more religious and less religious and a little bit religious. Like in Islam, you have 10 ways of being religion. So in Israel, so you have what? 4 parties who are religious. What the hell? They look only for preserving the Torah and this kind of thing. Why do we have to have 4 of them? And the same with the left. Left and more left, a little bit left, and left center,
right
center
to the
left.
right to the right to the right to the
These people want to see the same. Let they join and do good work.
Now, when it comes to and I'm looking at these campaigns and and the margin of errors, left to the left to the left, but it was a campaign, and I have to say I have to agree with the undecided. If you open digital media this morning, many of the people I know, many of the thousands of friends that I have, are putting statuses. Okay, I've decided, and we're talking about Friday. It's Friday the 13th. It's 2 days before elections, and people are still, are banging, with their decisions, so to speak, 2 days before. I'm trying to think with Noam for these clips that we've seen. The campaigns have been mostly effective in social media these days,
right? But there's no correlation. Again, there is no correlation between winning an election and doing great campaigns on the internet. Benjamin Netanyahu did amazing viral videos conveying the right messages to the Likud, and again, on the polls right now, and maybe on the election, maybe he's going to lose. While the Zionist Union did, how can I say that diplomatically, bad campaign on the internet. And maybe
and maybe
Netanyahu had the help. Maybe the Zionist Union had the help of many of the media. In the media in Israel is very enthusiastic about replacing Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been blaming the main newspaper in Israel, Yediot Achronot, about being part of a campaign to topple him. There is some justice in that statement from Netanyahu. The most popular newspaper in Israel is very much anti-Bibi and has been very much promoting.
But I will have to beg and differ that Benjamin Netanyahu also has his own newspaper.
Well, that's true,
so
but that's true. But Yediot Achronot, given Israel Hayom, is the most popular paper in the country, but Yediot Achronot is the most established one. Okay,
which is also something a Prime Minister needs to expect, such as is the case with the United States' his favorite country, New York Times, pro-liberal, Washington Post, usually leaning to the right.
But it's not about politics. It's not about politics. It's about money. It's about power. It's about influence. It's a media war. It's a media war between Sheldon Edelson.
Or between me and you. Yeah.
Could be. But Netanyahu was targeted. I have to say it in his benefit. He was targeted by Yediot Achronot in a very unfair way. Something that and the campaign in many ways had to try and overcome that. And I think in many ways it did succeed to at least expose the face of Yediot Achronot.
And that said, back to the viral campaign, though, he did conduct a fascinating campaign, as he said, a very good, PR-wise, it was hilarious, it was funny. I want us to take a look at one of the Likud viral videos that were really, very highly produced, good scripts. Let's take a look at what everybody deemed here as the babysitter viral video that went viral early on at the election campaign. Let's have a look.
ממי, למתי הזמנת את הבייביסיטר? אנחנו מאחרים.
אוי, ראש הממשלה. איזה כבוד. מה אתה עושה פה?
הזמנתם בייביסיטר? קיבלתם ביביסיטר. איפה הילדים?
אבל אתה ראש הממשלה. אתה תשמור לנו על הילדים?
תראו, זה או אני, או ציפי ובוז'י.
לא. בוז'י, הילדים שלנו צריכים לשמור עליו.
עד שנחזור לא יהיה לנו בית.
הוא אפילו ימסור את השטיחים. וציפי?
ציפי, שעתיים במקום אחד.
עד שתחזרו, היא בטח כבר תעבור לשכנים. בבחירות הקרובות, אתם בוחרים מי ישמור על הילדים שלנו. בבחירות הקרובות, מצביעים רק הליכוד. די, ציפי.
No, I'm going to tell you, when I look at this clip, okay, I mean, again, irrespective of political persuasion, it's genius. It's genius. Come on.
At first, back in the 80s, well, I was a baby back then, people sat on the television.
Yeah, okay.
People sat on the television,
right.
Near the television every day at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and watch Lisa Peretz, and watch the Agashash HaChiver.
A satirical Israeli group.
And Sefi Rivlin. And now the spots are chasing us on the internet. People.
But not only that, you know what just came to my mind? You said, you know, all these people, all these celebs back in the Israeli politics days were highlighting the videos, were highlighting the clips. This is Netanyahu himself.
Yeah.
He's the main star of his own clips.
Yeah.
And you know, in those times that he was a baby, in order to be known for something, you had to be something. You had for quite some time to write well or speak well and so on. Today, you only have to master a Twitter or Facebook in order to be famous.
But besides the Likud...
Blogger.
True. That's all you need.
Besides the Likud spots, most of the parties didn't make amazing viral videos, amazing spot. It's kind of banalic. Self-age people, the people from the field of the parties shooting themselves. Something that every election has done, and it is done in this election campaign as well. The parties didn't make amazing job, and again, the Likud, who made amazing job,
not necessarily reaping the benefits in the polls right now, as the poll that we also. Before we conclude this bit, I want to take a look also. This is the last poll, ladies and gentlemen, coming out of Professor Avi Degani. That's the last poll that legally also in Israel is allowed to come out on a Friday before the elections. Let's take a look at those numbers. I-24 News revealing last poll of Professor Avi Degani of the, there we go. Numbers coming out this morning, 21 Likud, Zionist Union 24. It's a poll that jives along with, as Professor Degani mentioned, with his colleagues, with other pollsters, that the Zionist Union is showing a lead these days, about 4 days before election, showing a lead above the other camp, the right-wing camp, the Likud camp of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you for that. And you guys are currently locked with us. Let's see if you'll be able to sneak out as we move along. Elections are not the only thing, elections in Israel are not the only thing that happens in Israel, as we who live here would like to think so very much. But there's also other news that we've missed while scanning the headlines. And for that, I am joined by the brilliant Charles. Please pronounce your last name.
Biblazer.
Thank you. On this March 13th, 2015, what do you have for us today?
Firstly, I'm not so sure about brilliant.
Come
on. We can talk after
I know, but flattery does get me everything.
Well, thank you.
There you go. Iran, though. We're going to start with Iran.
We start with Iran. Iran's Khamenei slams U.S. Republicans for the letter that they sent, basically as blowback for Obama's so-called bad deal in the making.
Right.
So obviously this is a Republican attempt to maintain some control over the process that's been ongoing. Based on leaks.
A groundbreaking one, I have to say. I don't think in the history of U.S. politics, you know, senators would go out that bluntly against the president with a letter.
It was extremely blunt. It was an affront to the president. There's no question about that. Whether it's unprecedented or not, that's been debated amongst Democrats and Republicans.
And here is the headline. Exclusive also coming out of Iran.
Yes. Okay, so this as well is possibly unprecedented. While they're still negotiating, they're obviously at the same time discussing at the United Nations Security Council to reduce sanctions and penalties that have already been levied through a number of resolutions, approximately 8 so far, 4 of which have actually levied sanctions on Iran.
And the fascinating point about this, as you started saying very rightfully so, that, you know, the deal, the framework, nothing has been signed yet.
Nothing has been signed. This is a bad sign honestly, in advance of the completion of the negotiations, and not even a final agreement. A framework of the agreement has not yet been achieved. And
a
U.S.
clear
Secretary,
that there are,
a clear gesture, but they still maintain that there are large gaps in order to bridge before any deal could be reached. So this looks a little bit premature. And I just want to say one statistic, for example, trade between Germany and Iran, Germany being a P5+1 country, increased by 30 to 40% last year alone. Countries are lining up in order to do business with Iran. This doesn't bode well.
Definitely so. Yes, go ahead, moving along.
We move along.
Times of Israel.
Yes, okay. So the former president of Israel has endorsed possibly the future prime minister. This is not really a surprise.
No.
They share the same ideological.
Everybody in the studio is like, yeah.
No, they share the same ideological background. Obviously, Perez was a staple in labor for many, many years, decades, in fact. And basically, Herzog is the party leader of labor
No, I gotta say, and I'm laughing because we still have Noam and also Professor Degani here, and you mentioned being a kid in the 80s, but me being a teenager in the 80s, the thing is that when you get an endorsement for Paris, sometimes it's the kiss of death.
The kiss of death.
And that's the thing that I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, ouch, Herzog is probably
especially with now Herzog in the lead, he doesn't want what happened to Herzog, what happened to Paris in '96 when Bibi came out of nowhere, and surprisingly,
he has been a great president.
I completely agree,
and
but still.
for the country.
Yeah.
There's no question. For the country. But in terms of surprising and whether it'll give him a bump,
who knows?
I doubt
it. Speaking of viral videos, I think Paris has a completely new career in that one as well. He's fabulous. Moving along.
He's over 90.
I know. We all want that gene. I'm telling you, we all want that gene. I think my mother has it. But okay, yes.
Next, we go on to Ferguson. This is an unassuming town in the United States that has become the focal point of these racial clashes. A couple of nights ago, 2 police officers were killed during a protest. Obviously, this dates back to August when the unarmed black teenager Michael Brown was shot, and the tensions persist.
Yeah, and we even were looking at video also that came out after the latest, the 2 police officers shot after, and this was after the police officer resigned. It's just, I can't stop saying this enough. I think when there's an African-American president in the United States that highlights that the racial divides are nowhere near being done, finished, or confronted with by the American people, and it's a sad thing, but who are we in the Middle East to argue that? Yes, moving on.
Moving on. Now, this is probably my most unfortunate story of the morning.
Yeah.
The Syria civil war is now entering its 5th year. Which half a decade ago was pretty much unimaginable. You're looking at some 220,000 people killed, another million injured, 12 million displaced, 8 of which internally. It's shocking. 21 aid organizations came out with a report the other day, and they said that the world basically has failed.
I'm actually glad
Syria.
that this is the last headline that we have time for, but very smart that you brought over 4 years, a war that's not going away.
Won't end.
When we get back, more Women in Politics, the Tal Shalev series. Zehava Galon featured this time. That's left to the left of the dial. Stay with us. First, the news. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition on this March 13th, 2015. We are 4 days to elections in Israel. Clock is ticking. It's getting very heated and exciting. It's time to talk about women. Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, is back with us in studio to bring us her latest in the series of profile of the women of Israeli politics, created together with photographer, camerawoman, and editor Loren Tulila. And also joining us is the head of the Diplomacy and Conflict Studies at the IDC Herzliya, Professor Galia Golan. Professor Golan, good morning to you. But Tal, I want to start with you. You intro this because Zehava Galon, the head of Meretz, I think is one of the most interesting women, especially now when Meretz has been debated so heatedly over the course of the last several weeks. Take it away.
Well, Galon is definitely the first lady of the Israeli left. She's the leader of maybe the only left-wing Jewish party, Meretz, and in many ways is depicted as many times portrayed as Shulamit Aloni's successor. Shulamit Aloni is the legendary leader of Ratz.
Passed away last year.
And Meretz, in 2013, she led the party to quite an achievement. The party, under her leadership, did double its number of seats in the 2013 election election from 3 to 6, that was considered an outstanding achievement. But unfortunately for Meretz at the moment, they are in the danger zone. Some of the polls do show that they could be wiped out next week, and this is happening because of two reasons. First of all, Jewish voters that have decided to vote to the United Arab List, and on the other hand, some of Meretz constituents who are moving to the Zionist Union in order to replace Netanyahu. And Galon is they're actually in these final days of the campaign, they're actually in a crisis mode, trying to wake up the voters to come back home. And Galon grew up from the bottom, and one of the interesting things about her is that she grew up from the bottom to the top. Right. She started out as an activist at the human rights organization B'Tselem, and she did build herself, start as all of the levels in the political system, and we had the chance to speak to her, me and Lauren. Let's see how it looks.
Let's take a look at this intimate profile.
שלום, קוראים לי זהבה גלון, אני עומדת בראשות מרץ, מפלגת השמאל הישראלית, ואני חושבת שמגיע לנו שיהיה לנו פה יותר טוב, אחר קצת. אני מעורבת המון שנים בפוליטיקה, פעילה בכל הדרגות, החל מלהיות מחלקת פליירים, מפגינה ברחובות, את יודעת, עושה את העבודה השחורה, ועד להיותי חברת כנסת, הייתי מזכ"ל רץ, מזכ"ל מרץ. זה לקח המון שנים, זה לקח למעלה מעשור, עד שנבחרתי, והדרך לא הייתה קלה, ולא הייתה סוגה בשושנים. התמודדתי המון פעמים, זה לא כמו שעכשיו, את באת, טרח, עוד לא אמר ג'ק רובינסון, את חברת כנסת. התמודדתי המון פעמים, ולא הצלחתי, ואם כבר הצלחתי, אז מרץ קיבלה פחות מנדטים. פוליטיקה זה משחק סכום אפס. כדי שאישה תיכנס, גבר צריך לצאת, והיו גברים שהיו פשוט המון שנים. גברים הרבה יותר חזקים, הרבה יותר בעלי אמצעים. אותם לא שואלים איך תסתדרי עם הילדים, זה כשהיו לי ילדים קטנים. איך תסתדרי עם הילדים? גברים אף פעם לא שואלים. בסופו של דבר לא ויתרתי, המשפחה שלי סביבי לא ויתרה, אמרה, את חייבת להמשיך, את לא מוותרת, ועשיתי את זה. אני אוהבת את העובדה שאני יכולה לשנות, שאני מרגישה שאני משנה, שאני מרגישה שאני משפיעה, שאני מחוקקת חוקים שיש להם משמעות כל כך גדולה, בכלל לגבי אנשים, אבל נשים בפרט. זה עושה לי את זה, אני בוכה כשאני לא מצליחה לחוקק חוק, ואני מאושרת כשאני עושה את זה, ואני אוהבת את המפגש הבלתי אמצעי עם אנשים, אני אוהבת לדבר, ואני יודעת שלא תמיד זה פופולרי, ולא תמיד זה בקונצנזוס, אבל הדבר הזה של לחדור לאנשים ולהשפיע ולשנות, בדברים שאני מאמינה בהם זה עושה לי. אני חושבת שאם לא הייתה לי תמיכה משפחתית, גם מבן הזוג שלי וגם הילדים שלי, לא הייתי יכולה לעשות את זה. בן הזוג שלי בדרך כלל מאחורי הקלעים מאוד מלווה אותי. אצלו אני בוכה, אצלו אני מתפרקת, בדרך כלל אני מאוד פייטרית ונלחמת ונאבקת, אז אני באה הביתה ובוכה או מתפרקת. שוביניזם זה שם המשחק, עם כל זה שאני כבר מחוסנת, ואני לא משאירה מישהו בלי תשובה, את יודעת, אני יודעת לענות לכל דבר ועניין. את רואה את זה בעיקר ברגעי מבחן, ברגעי משבר, ברגעי חירום, נניח בימי מלחמה, ברגעים שיש מתיחות ביטחונית, כשאני יושבת באולפנים או אני מביעה עמדה, אז את רואה תמיד איזה גנרל לשעבר או מישהו מסתכל עלייך, כאילו מה? כאילו, באמת, את אישה, מה את מבינה? לא אכלתי איתנו מאותו מסטינג, לא שכבתי איתנו במערבים, לא צנחתי איתנו, אני לא יודעת איפה. אז תמיד את רואה זה ככה יוצא, אבל אני לא נותנת לזה להשפיע עליי. כל מה שגבר יודע לעשות, אישה עושה את זה הרבה יותר. או לא פחות טוב, בואי ננסח את זה ככה. אני לא מוכנה להיכנע לתכתיבים האלה ולציפייה הזאת שנשים תאמצנה דפוסי התנהלות או דפוסי התנהגות גבריים. אני זורמת כמו שאני לא מרגישה ככה. אני אוהבת להתלבש יפה, אני אוהבת להיראות טוב, לא תמיד אני מספיקה, לא תמיד אני מגיעה לפנפן, אבל אני אוהבת את זה ואני לא מוכנה להיכנע לדפוסים האלה. אני עושה את זה בדרכי שלי, במודל שאני פיתחתי.
Tal, as you mentioned, also the woman at the forefront of a very, almost like Likud in many ways, no, at the forefront of a battle, so to speak, to see that Meretz, the party that she's heading, is actually going to make it through in these last elections.
Even more difficult and
more
dangerous
difficult,
battle.
Obviously.
I think there's a big concern. It's not only amongst left-wing voters. There's an importance to have a left-wing party in the Israeli parliament. If the Zionist Union today is very much moderate left, even leaning to the right with Tzipi Livni inside. Yeah. It's not even Labor. And the fact that there will not be Zehava Galon, Meretz and Zehava Galon promoting on a several range of issues, social issues, but primarily the Palestinian conflict. There's a voice that their voice is a very important voice, at least to be heard in the Israeli parliament. And the fact that they are in danger of being erased is a very worrying fact.
And I think indicative in many ways, we sat here and discussed yesterday that a leftist became a dirty word, that it was very hard for people to actually align themselves with something that is considered the extreme left.
But we have to say, Meretz did not have a good campaign. They had a very so it's not only about it is about campaigning. When someone is from the left side of the political spectrum, these are his positions, and he comes to decide. He needs to decide between the Zionist Union and Meretz. The Zionist Union do have a very strong clause, a very strong argument that if someone gives them their vote, there is a chance that Netanyahu will be replaced. Meretz are trying to convince that if the vote goes to them, it will prevent a national unity government. It will prevent Netanyahu from coming back to office. But in any case, they're in a very delicate situation. But maybe because of that, they might be saved, because their voters might be coming back home at the end of the day and trying to save the party and trying to make sure that it passes the electoral threshold.
Going back to the woman at the head of Meretz, Professor Galon, who is at the IDC Herzliya, head of diplomacy and conflict studies. When we look at women in Israeli politics, and when we look at the last government, women's issues, because this beautiful series by Tal Shalev and Lauren Tulila highlights the women in Israeli politics, which always it feels that once they enter politics, women in Israel tend to shed off, maybe not Merav Michaeli, but they tend to shed off their feminist agenda. They tend to shed off the feminist prism in order to survive. Would you say that is the case?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think what happens is that the feminists who get in remain feminists, and the women who get in who are not feminists remain not feminists. And the research that I've done recently, I looked years ago at the 13th Knesset and then recently at the 18th Knesset to see what women do when they get there. And what I found is when we have much larger numbers of women in the Knesset today, 25, 27, enormous numbers when you think that the average used to be around 10, 11. But the same picture emerges. About 5 women out of that 27 will be those who are pushing legislation that borders on women's interests, serves women's interests. They always come from the left, sometimes from the center. This is in every country, by the way, and this is historically the case, and it remains the case. Every time, no matter how many women we have there, you'll find that the same parties are the ones that are pushing women's issues, and maybe a man as well. If it was Dedi Zucker in the past from Meretz, if it's Dov Chanin and Ilan Galon, they are feminists. And part of the ideology of their party, if you take a party like Meretz, this is a party that's based on an ideology of human rights, women's rights, gay rights, and so on. This is part of their code. This is their credo. So the men in Meretz are right up there with the women, of course, in terms of proposing bills that further women's rights and so forth. So I really think it's not a question of numbers. We'd like to see more women in the Knesset. We'd like the educational value of seeing women in these positions. But if we want legislation that promotes women's rights or women's interests, we have to elect people who really want to do that. And they happen to be on the left, mainly in Meretz.
Mainly Meretz. And when it comes to, female women in politics in Israel, when you're looking at, the outgoing Knesset, women passed more laws, women had their say more. Are we looking at the trend upwards? I'm trying to find a crack in the ceiling. That's what I'm asking.
Well, I think that women are certainly more active today in politics from the bottom up. I think that's part of the phenomenon that we've been seeing. A good deal of that is this relative success in terms of numbers, has come from the quota system, of demanding a minimum percentage. Of course, it began with Meretz and Labor way back when. Meretz was the only party and remains the only party that talks about 40% for each gender. But most of the parties have these.
Merav was trying to push that legislation as well. But yes, so is the camp.
I think another thing that's really very interesting is when we saw the primaries ending in this election, what was very interesting is that the press picked up how many women are on that list, and it became an important thing that Likud has only
discussion. It became a discourse. It became a discussion.
This is a new phenomenon. Yeah. This is a new phenomenon that the electorate seems to care that there are women there. Last night I heard Herzog on television proudly say that his list has the highest number of women, which is not true because Meretz, of course, does.
It has more, but still, people are boasting and it's becoming a discussion.
Exactly.
And once we talk, there possibly may be change. Professor Galon, thank you so much. Sadly, you're locked with us in here, but there's another woman in the studio. I know.
I love the studio. I love the studio.
Isn't this great? Who's patiently been waiting to give us the most important news of the day. We're going to embarrass ourselves galore right now in front of you with the web review. The spiral viral that is the web review. Yes.
Well, Canadians are weird.
Yes, they
apparently. And I mean, I've heard so. And then I saw this thing on the Weather Channel saying they have this freezing hairstyle contest. Yes, every February. This is so cool. It's in a lake. It's called Tahini Hot Springs in Whitehorse, Yukon in Canada. And yeah, this is what you're supposed to be doing. It takes up to 60 seconds to freeze. You see, this is how they do it. There's another way of doing it. You can just lay your hair on the edge of the spring, and then it freezes. You get $150 if you win this contest. These were three tourists from France.
Where is this in Canada? That's terrifying.
Yukon in Canada.
Okay.
February every year you can register. Around 20 people tried to win this contest this year.
Next vacation.
And you know, $150, it's not much.
I think I know. They would have to be some more zeros to send me out there. Yes, moving along.
Another good news is that Tim Burton is about to direct another Disney great film, a Disney action remake of Dumbo. And this is after he did, we remember Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella.
Can I say something about Dumbo? Dumbo freaked me out as a kid.
Really?
Yeah,
I was terrified of it.
Tim Burton will make it like into a really
perverted, really creepy. I don't know why I was scared of Dumbo. The idea of, this, whatever. But it's just
a sad story, actually.
Bambi's a sad story. They're all horrible stories.
Dumbo's
they keep killing the mothers of the animals. Also, Dumbo loses his mother. Yeah. It's a terrible story. Yes.
She wasn't killed.
No?
No, she was just jailed, I think.
She was worse.
Yeah, because
yeah, she's jailed.
His mom is jailed, and he's got really long ears.
Yeah,
that's really bad.
But it's very cool. Also, Beauty and the Beast is about to come up in 2017, and also Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass,
which is a fabulous book.
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't remember the name of the dragon like the entire morning. I was trying to think about it. And also good news for movie lovers.
Things of substance. Things of substance. Yes.
Zoolander returns. I know you're a fan of this movie. And the way Zoolander, and the way they promoted this sequence is very, very cool. It was at the Paris Fashion Week. Owen Wilson and Ben Stiller they did their catwalk, in the Fashion Week in the Valentino show, and everybody was.
Do you remember the name of the look, Ben Stiller? What was the name of that look that was like the classy look that he invents to become the best model? You don't remember? Blue Steel.
Blue Steel. I haven't.
You haven't seen Zoolander?
Yeah, I haven't.
Studio now.
I know. Well, it's supposed to be released in February 2016, and the plot will involve Zoolander's overweight son. This is what the article on The Guardian says.
I'm sorry, that's movie classics for you.
And, well, because we talked about women so much, there's this woman from Germany named Ilone Castartia, and she noticed a very powerful statement on Twitter saying, imagine if men were as disgusted with rape as they are with periods. So that made her thinking. She went all over Karlsruhe in Germany, where she lives, and you saw that, and she posted like these sanitary
pads, and actually wrote that
napkins,
line on
exactly, and she wrote feminist messages like
no, exactly what you said.
We have it exactly.
And now, Charles, sadly, all the time we have, but of course, you are the most important bit of the show. And coming up next, the best of the week. Do stay with us. All the interviews that were worth to mention and listen to. Do look at them because they all deal with the elections. And of course, it is March 13th. It's 4 days to Israeli elections. Stick around with I-24 News. We will give you all the latest TikToking to the elections. Stay with us. Welcome back. It is still Monday, March 9th, 2015. This is still the morning edition. Last I checked, I'm still Yelevi. Thank you for staying with us, as you should have. Why? International Women's Day marked this week, and when it comes to feminism in Israel, one name rises above all others, Merav Michaeli. The woman at the forefront of most of the feminist debates, battles, and as of late, also political bills she has been trying to pass as a Knesset member with the Zionist camp, has spent her many years in the public eye. Now, prior to entering politics, Merav Michaeli was known as one of Israel's most prominent journalists, an op-ed writer for Haaretz newspaper, and the producer and star of her own primetime documentary and current affairs television and radio programs. Yes, that's what you find out when you Google her, but she is best known for her ability to consistently challenge conventional views, mainly those who deal with women's rights. Never afraid to tackle taboo subjects, Michaeli gave a TED lecture back in 2012 arguing in favor of canceling the institution of marriage. And we are very happy to be joined in studio by the Zionist Union Israel Labour Party MP, Merav Michaeli. Merav, good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for this amazing introduction. I mean, can't get any better from here, you know.
I know. Now I'm going to make it hard.
Okay.
But first of all, you are, and I'm not just saying this, even though flattery does get us everything, whether you're a man or a woman, one of the most impressive women, I think, in the Middle East and in Israel. It takes guts to say what you've said in many, many years. You are now in politics. Actually, to start by this, you said before you entered politics that you were afraid you were going to enter the system and find out that there's no ability to make change from within.
Right.
What do you think now?
I was amazed to find out how much you can do, and saying this from the opposition after spending almost 2 years in the opposition. And often I'd feel like I was in a candy store, that, you just need to just
Really?
You can choose so many options, so many amazing things that you can do. If only I had more staff, which is a problem in Israeli.
Oh my God, yeah.
In Israeli parliament, we have very, very little staff to work with, unfortunately. But if really I could have done so much more, I was able to pass legislation that I didn't dare to dream that I would be able to do in my first term, and certainly in my first 2 years. So certainly you can do a lot. Maybe it changes when you become the government, even though it should be, the other way around.
Completely.
But I'm sure we'll find that out after March 17th when Yitzhak Bougie Herzog forms the government, and we'll be able to find out how much you can actually do when you are the government and you are the ones who determine the policies.
Well, listen, you've called the elections, and I'm asking you about that. These elections, and first of all, it's wonderful to hear as a woman that if the government is a candy store, there are many things that, I would like to pick and choose and put you at the forefront of them. But women, these elections, let's start by that, within the Israeli politics, nicely represented, especially one has to state the obvious, in the Zionist camp. There are many women in very, very important strategic places in that list. But over the course of the last several weeks, the strongest woman who joined that camp, Tzipi Livni, their political analysts, and I'm stating what many critics have said, seems to have been hidden away, seems to have been pushed aside because people believe within the camp, or so they say, that she is not good for the polls.
This is yet another spin coming from Likud, coming from the right. There was a column at the end of the week in Haaretz trying to realize why the right hates Tzipi Livni so much. What is it about her that makes them so uncomfortable? So this is just one other spin. I mean, only this morning you could hear Tzipi Livni on the most prominent radio show in the radio. She's everywhere. She's not going anywhere. She's definitely not being hidden. This union between her and Herzog, I mean, on a personal level also, is so strong. There's so much trust there. There's a notion of a joint vision, a joint mission that they're going for together. She's really a prominent part of the Zionist Union today, and she's not going anywhere.
And when it comes to the criticism towards her, be it spin or not, people say that the critics say that she has jumped ship or changed agendas over the course of her political career. Do you think she would face the same criticism if she were a man?
Yes, I think Shaul Mofaz, about the agenda, Shaul Mofaz at the time said, you remember he said he'd never leave Likud, and then he went to Kadima, and he was criticized over that. But it's not that she wouldn't have been criticized were she a man, but it's about the tone, the volume. I mean, it's becoming much more, the criticism is becoming much more dominant and much more the face of things when it is about a woman. Now, it's not about changing her agenda, actually. They're attacking her for changing parties because she stuck to her agenda. This is the amazing thing. They're accusing her for sticking to her beliefs and ideology and therefore moving from one party to another where she thought she'd be able to actually act on what she believes. So, yes, chauvinism, sexism haven't gone anywhere.
They still exist,
yes.
Sadly. So, speaking of chauvinism, sexism, and, and females and women in Israel, there are several interesting polls that came out over the course of the last weeks. I'd call them, not disturbing, but, women supposedly in Israel, and this is according to a Ynet poll, do not really vote for women. They vote more for men. They find that, men are more reliable. And I'm wondering with you out loud, where have we gone wrong? Women at the forefront in trying to lead the agenda in that. And also that women seem to prefer Prime Minister Netanyahu when they go into the booth.
So, first of all, let me just correct one thing. When Tzipi Livni, back in 2009, was a candidate for Prime Minister, women voted for her in huge numbers. This was the one time there was a very clear and distinct gender vote in Israel, really in huge numbers. Women just voted for Tzipi Livni. I think many of them, regardless of her policies, just because for the first time since Golda Meir, we had a woman candidate for prime minister, which made women, I think, proud, and it made them identify with her immediately and instinctively without regard to really what she was standing for, I think. It's true that today, women, by the way, you're saying that they prefer men. Unfortunately, I find that they prefer Netanyahu and Lapid over Herzog. So it's not that they don't prefer men, they prefer macho men. This is the most disappointing thing, maybe.
Will we never learn?
Yes. And where did we go wrong? I don't think it's, I wouldn't like to put the blame on us. With all due respect, we still live in a man's world. The images we're all exposed to are still images created by men for the benefit of men. And the question is about leadership. What does the word leadership bring into mind? And it brings to mind the suit. And the suit is tailored for a man. There's this new Hollywood movie. It's called Kingsman, I think. And Colin Firth, he says there that the suit is the armor of the modern man, which is so correct.
One of the best descriptions.
And we do not have such an armor. Women are supposed to wear things that not only don't they hide our body and leave out the head, the leadership, but rather are designed to do exactly the opposite, to put the body in the front. So it has a direct link to leadership. I don't know if any of your viewers or you have watched the movie Misrepresentation. The very, very important.
We just discussed actually in the previous segment.
Yes, and Misrepresentation shows the direct link between the representation of women on the media in America and in the Western world to what we can do and our opportunities in the real world in general and in leadership and politics especially.
No, and it's a valid, very true point. Other than you, and one cannot say this about you, you entered politics with a very clear agenda. You have not blinked throughout your years in journalism or in politics that feminism, the female issue, is at the top of the agenda. But there's also the argument, and one can show it also in polls, that women, while they enter politics in Israel, start shedding off their feminist agenda and feel that in order to succeed and in order to actually be more, one would say lean in, if I can use that term, in order to lean in, yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
In order to lean in, you have to be more male, you have to be more macho, or you have to be more butch.
It's, first of all, this goes for,
in any form of profession.
But about leaving the feminism aside, this is, I think, the more important point, because you can debate the point of how macho do you need to become as a woman, but it's undebatable that you need to put feminism aside because it's considered to be a niche. And while you're dealing with niches, you cannot become a national leader. Now, I will say about myself that it's not that feminism is my primary agenda or primary topic. It's the lens through which I look at everything. And I said that in my inaugural speech in the Knesset. There is no such thing as women apart from men, apart from society, economy, security, nationality, anything. First of all, we as women are a part of everything. And the other thing is that I am not asking how do we save the unfortunate women from their destiny, but rather how do we as women, with our view of the world, save the society? How do we come and make a better society and a better world from our feminist perspective and understanding? This is our mission. Now, men are doing their best to undermine this option.
Right.
So that is the reason, I think, why many women tend to, well, they wouldn't say, fortunately, and this is really, I'm happy to say that most members of Knesset in Israel today will testify to themselves as feminists. But they will not put this at the front.
At the front of the agenda.
That's true.
Exactly. They will not put it at the front of the agenda because they most likely might lose votes.
Because we still are a minority. In Israel, we were, the last Knesset was the one with the largest number of members, 27 out of 120. That's still a little less than a quarter. In America, they still haven't managed to pass over 20% representation of women in parities, like this long forgotten dream. As long as we're a minority, this will remain a problem. And one of the things that one of the legislations that I presented, I didn't have a chance to promote it.
Because the government fell apart.
Talks about minimum 40% representation for each sex
Gender.
in every party that wants to run for the Knesset, mandatory. Hopefully, we'll be able to promote it. In the next term.
In the next term. But I'm wondering with you, because, all the points very valid, but we also, women here in the Middle East, live in a certain reality, in a region where actually the patriarchal society is gaining more traction. Now, in a lecture that you gave in 2012 at TED, that my partner and I'm not going to call him my husband, my partner and I over yesterday on the balcony had a big fight about it, because he said marriage actually is more for the benefit of women. It protects women and it goes against the man's natural agenda. Though, what I'm leading to here is, do you think that what you are demanding or asking women to do, to look like you at the world through a prism of feminism, is something that sadly is not that viable in this day and age, is not something that they can actually, let's face it, there are women in the Middle East, I'm not talking, the Iraqi women, the women in Kurdistan, and even women in Israel that can't afford to let go of that institution.
I beg to differ. Not about the institution, leave the institution aside for a minute, but about looking through this lens. Feminism and huge and powerful feminist women and feminist movements are rising in Iraq, in Afghanistan, Check it out. Huge, amazing feminist forces are, first of all, of course, we're part of...
Endangering their lives, but, the voices are trying to be heard.
But that's what they're doing, and they were a part of what drove what was called at the time the Arab Spring.
Right.
A very important part of it.
Look at what happened to them in Egypt because of that. That's the concern. That's the question. I'm not saying shut up, but yeah.
But this is part of the revolution. This is always what happens during revolutions. And it's also true in Israel. Look at the ultra-Orthodox women who came out now against their own parties saying, we demand to be represented. It didn't work yet. It will be so in the next term. I'm sure in next elections we'll see ultra-Orthodox women in ultra-Orthodox party. It's happening all the time because we do not have another choice.
No, amen to that.
We have no other alternative.
Amen. I mean, we have very little time left. Do you think Israel is ready again for a female prime minister, and do you think you'll ever be one?
Oh, ever for sure. I don't know how soon, but ever.
Ready. You think that Israel is ready?
It will be.
Sooner than... Yeah, no, I think we need several more years on. And finally, as you said, and you plugged in, and you're still here, and you are a politician, in the coming election, are we looking at a change, or we're looking at a complete...
I have I don't want to say faith, because I really believe that that's what's going to happen. I'm sure that Herzog will be the one forming the next government, it will be a center-left government that will make a difference.
Amichali, I cannot tell you how much fun I had. I don't know about you, but it was great.
Likewise. Thank you so very much.
Here. Before we go to the news, please take a look at Marie Cartier, our woman in Paris, about Make It Happen, International Women's Day. Let's see what happens in France for women.
Make it happen for me means to continue to defend the rights of the people, especially women's freedom all over the world at a time when religious fundamentalists are trying to confiscate it.
And of course, stay with us. When we come back, more women's issues, only women in studio. I'm having so much fun today. First though, the news. And thank you for staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition on this March 11, 2015. Again, 6 days to the Israeli elections. Our next item deals with how politics becomes very personal in the country of Israel. Now, tens of thousands of Israelis attended a rally in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square on Saturday evening to call for the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, to be replaced in elections later this month. Organized under the banner Israel Wants Change and dubbed an anti-Netanyahu event, the rally was headlined by former Mossad chief Meir Dagan, and who told the crowd of Israel that Israel is facing the worst leadership crisis in its history. But Michal Kasten Kedar was speaking there too. She's the widow of the late Lieutenant Colonel Dolev Kedar, who was killed in Operation Protective Edge. That was the operation of the war over the summer, where Hamas and Israel battled. She also spoke at the rally and pleaded with Israelis to vote for a leader who would not send soldiers into another war. Yes, Mr. Prime Minister, is what she said. What's important is life itself. But it's impossible to speak all the time about Iran and to turn a blind eye to the bloody conflict with the Palestinians, which costs us so much blood. This is what Michal Kasten Kedar said on that stage, and we are very honored to be joined by her in studio this morning. Michal, good morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to tell you that I was crossing the square, Rabin Square, when you got on stage this Saturday. And the first line that you said, and I think was the beginning that resonated so strongly in my mind, was that you said that nobody in this election campaign is speaking about the war over the summer. First of all, how does that make you feel, and why do you think that is the case?
Well, it's very frustrating, makes me very angry. Many people ask me if I'm angry that no one, people, the community doesn't talk about the war. That I think is fine. It's healthy for a nation, for a people, not to dwell on the war, on the death, but to look forward. But that's the people. The leadership cannot, not talk about a war where 73 people were killed, civilians and soldiers, and go on talking about everything else, basically, when there's an election coming up.
Let's talk about your husband for a second. Dolev, how many years were you together?
16. Not enough.
You have 3 children?
Yes.
Now, you actually, in the past, you're a filmmaker and a lawyer, I think, as well.
Studied law.
Didn't go on with it. Practicing. You made a film. You live in an area in Israel called Modi'in. You made a film in 2009 called, in English, we would
Waiting.
say Waiting. Because you live in a community of military women.
Yes.
Being married to Dolev, I'm sure that you were not expecting, but fearing a moment as such many, many years.
Well, when I was making the film, my producer kept telling me, put more of the fear inside the film. I want to sell it abroad. It has to talk about the fear because that's what makes you different from other people. But the weird thing is that fear doesn't really exist, at least in my life, and I know in the lives of other military families, because it's all the time there, and because it's such a big fear. If you realize it to yourself, if you don't hide it to yourself, you can't really go on living, because you'd be in constant, fear of life. It's like the biggest fear there is. You can't live with it inside of you, so you kind of turn a blind eye to it most of the time. It hits you at times, and then every time it touched me for a moment, it would stay for for quite a while. But most of the time, I just, turn a blind eye to it and to the dangerous things that Dolev was doing.
Dolev, you lost Dolev over there, as we mentioned, in Operation Protective Edge. That was over the summer. In this past weekend, you chose to speak at the rally. Why did you choose to speak at the rally? Which was a left-wing leaning rally, which was
Yes, I was always a leftist. I always thought that, I was always sure that peace is the only solution to the problems here. War is a terrible thing to both sides, to all sides. No winners in war. And I was always a leftist. I think the thoughts started kind of bubbling in me near November 5th this year, the time of Rabin's death, which that time of year always made me, sad. You'd think, what would have been if he hadn't died? What would our country and our lives look like? But this year, I realized that the thoughts were much worse and much more personal. It's not just, what if he hadn't died, we'd have a better country. It was, what if he hadn't died, there'd be peace here, and I'd still have my beautiful, loving husband with me. And I started thinking about speaking back then in November, but it was too soon. And when the government decided about new elections, I realized that no one was talking about the war, and I started getting angry. I started writing a column. I started with a column about the elections. Right. And last Thursday, my friends started talking about the rally. Shall we go? Shall we not? And it was kind of a whim. I just got the number of the organizers, called them up and said, very pretentiously, like, let me speak. I want to speak.
I don't think pretentious at all. I think if anybody has the right to speak, it's you. You got reactions to it, and I'm going to have to touch on it. We were talking earlier in this broadcast about the polarization in the country, about the division. A man by the name of Hagai Guberman in a right-wing leaning channel, Channel 7, has said a horrific thing after you spoke. He said that in many ways that you I almost do not want to repeat this, that in many ways you caused your husband's death, and then you're going on stage and crying over it.
Whining.
Whining. You quoted
I
him.
know that word, whining.
Whining. Yes. When you hear something like that, first of all, what would be your... I'm sure you had a reaction. Other than punching a wall, I would have.
No, many people called me up, very worried, asking me if I was fine, but I just thought it was, well, not silly, but all the big festival around it, I thought it was silly because, first of all, we're at an election. Talk about the essence of things. Talk about the war. Talk about the economics. Don't talk about what, a journalist who no one knew before this said to me or didn't say to me. I had such a big, horrible thing happen to me in the summer that a few words that anyone says or writes about me, I couldn't care less. It would take a very big thing to shock me now at this stage of my life. And I have to admit that some of the things he said inside and what he said to defend himself, he was right. I put myself out there. I decided not to be this normal, very dignified, quiet widow, just going to ceremonies quietly and crying in the side. I decided to put myself out there to talk about politics, and yes, to use my status as a widow for politics, because I think it's important, and that I wanted to do everything I can to help try at least to change the situation. So I put myself out there, and I should be ready for criticism.
Well, first of all,
of course he could have chosen better words, but I mean, who cares? I lost my husband. I really couldn't care about what anyone says about me.
No, very, very valid, and we're going to go back to what is really important, and that is your husband and the legacy that he leaves you. I'm wondering with you, you said before that you chose to enter, well, you have a column that you write in Walla, correct? Am I correct in saying that? You said that the most horrible thing happened to you over the summer. When you look at this election campaign, and these polarizing thought and these polarizing notions and these polarizing statements, what would you like to see happen? What do you think should happen in this country? What are the things that, you know, when you say that the campaigners are not talking about war, that you think the Israelis need to hear?
Well, you know, you started it. You started talking about it. It's just impossible that the whole campaign is going on with no one talking about the conflict with the Palestinians. You know, people, they talk about Iran. Mostly they're talking about economics now because the word peace has become taboo.
A bad word.
A bad word, and even the Labour Party are escaping it like you escape from fire. But it's the base to everything here. You know, even the economics. One of the reasons the economics is such in a bad state is because we need to put so much money in security, and because you can't expect big investments from abroad to come to Israel when there's a war going on every year with missiles going and the economics shutting down. So it is the basics. And also, like I said, before we start talking about the level of life, we have to talk about life itself. And you can't be ready to accept the death of a few, tens of soldiers, even if it is only soldiers and not civilians. You can't, just be expected to live with it. That's life, that's what we are. Like some people from the right wing say, this is life, we're in a bad neighborhood, it's inevitable, that's how it's going to be. I don't want to live like this. I do not want to expect this from life. Life should be more. We should have a normal life. Just be interested in football and shopping and food and not having to be afraid from war all the time.
Amen to that. One can only hope. But you and Dolev never really had a normal life in many ways. I mean, he was a military man to begin with.
Yes. Well, when I made my film, it's very difficult for me to watch this film now, and not just because it's looking at Dolev, but because when I made it, I was, frustrated from the fact that my husband only comes home once every 2 weeks, and the kids miss him, and I talk about it all the time that the kids miss him, and it's difficult to raise kids by myself. And I married him in order to be with him, not for him to only come home once every 2 weeks. And it's very saddening to watch it now because I take it willingly with both hands now. If he'd come home even once a month, that'd be enough for me.
For 1 hour. The community that I know this is difficult, first of all. The community that you live in is a community of women, and I don't think many people realize it, of women that live with men that go often to war. And I'm assuming that your message is to try and stop that, going away so many times to war in this country. Do you think that, what would you like? What would you like the leaders of this country to hear? Just before, in the minutes that we have, the leaders of this country to hear, whomever it may be, from right or left?
No, we just want to have a nice, quiet, simple life. And the only way to do it is to reach a settlement with the Palestinians. They won't go away. They're here. They're here to stay. And now that there's long-range missiles, it's even more difficult to close your eyes. It's not like in the West Bank, we just build a wall and say, okay, we'll live here, they'll live there. They won't interrupt us, we can pretend they're not there. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like this, So even if you're not a left wing who wants to end the occupation because of moral and ethics, and you can't control a whole people, even if it is just for security reasons, you have to end this conflict, and it will only end in one way, which is a settlement. We tried force. Every time there was a big big army operation, and we say, okay, no, it didn't work this time because we didn't use enough force. Let's hit them harder next time. So it hit them harder and harder and harder, and it doesn't work. It won't go away. I think the sad thing here is all the high-ranking officers, they're always saying, it won't end. We can't win this with the army. You need to reach a settlement. The army people say that, and not left-wing army people, right-wing army people. And all the people not all, but many people who live in that area, in the West Negev, they're also saying, please give us a settlement. We cannot keep living with these missiles falling on us, and they will never end until you reach a settlement. You cannot end this with force.
Important and very, very, very wise word. Finally, first of all, once again, I want to tell you, I think you're incredibly, incredibly courageous. Support you've been receiving from people that you never met. Have you been approached by people in this country? Because I'm wondering if that just shows that one can bridge the divide, one can get to a point.
Yes. Actually, in a way, I'm happy of the incident with that reporter who wrote those awful words, because I've been getting support from people all over. I've been getting phone calls from people I don't know who live in the settlements, right-wing people who live in the settlements, religious people. Yesterday I got a very emotional letter from heads of 2 yeshivas where I live, saying that even though they do not agree with anything I say, I'm very courageous and I have every right to go on stage, and they're happy that I did, and they denounce everything that reporter said.
It's a sliver, it's a sliver of hope. Chal, I have to tell you, thank you so much for coming today. I know this was not easy. I think your words are incredibly important. I think your message is incredibly important. You have, sadly, every right, to say the things that you say. That was it for us today. I-24 News Morning Edition. Do tune in tomorrow morning for another edition, and have a quiet and peaceful day.